something some of you know about me, others maybe not, is that for many years now, one of the things true about me, sort of in my heart, is joy. Even when I have been in places of great trial or trouble or even grief. And I would say this, that we sometimes think joy and sadness are mutually exclusive. Not true. The joy of the Lord particularly can be present even with great sadness or in the middle of a great trial. And I think, in a way that we don't really understand, that joy gives us strength to face those trials, that it's still there. It is, we might say it's His Spirit present in us, or a gift, or the more we try to define it, I think, the less we understand it, actually. Better just to accept the gift that God gives us when we know Him. Knowing this, there are some things in the music that we've heard this morning, in the scriptures that were read about the bride, the one who had turned and fled and worshiped foreign gods, had multiple husbands, and ultimately God reclaims her. And that's us. We all become that beautiful bride without stain or wrinkle, not because we were great at washing our dirty garments or ironing them, but because the one who loves us made them clean. And this isn't just metaphor. This really is sort of a description of our souls and the wrinkledness and dirt in them. I shared once my friend Gary, who's since gone to be with the Lord, when we were, I think, probably high school or maybe college, one time said to me, some days I feel like a raisin, sort of all small and shriveled up and brown, but I'm shooting to be a grape. Plumped out, fulfilled, brilliant color. I think that is what our fulfillment looks like through this journey. It's the plumping out of the raisin. And I want to give us a couple of sort of keys or insights or ways to begin to live this out. Not that we haven't, but just maybe this will be some help. The first is to look at the very end here of Luke's Gospel in chapter 24. And this is after the experience of the disciples on the road to Emmaus, where Jesus shows up. This is after the crucifixion, after the resurrection. Many of them, all of them nearly, don't know yet that he's been raised from the dead and that he lives. And the disciples particularly are scared to death. They're afraid what happened to their rabbi happens to them next. The authorities are coming after them. They got the rebel leader. Now let's go get his minions. So they're scared, and they're out hiding in a locked room. And two of them are leaving Jerusalem, headed toward Emmaus. And Jesus, Yeshua, shows up on the road, starts walking with them. They don't realize who it is. And ultimately, he's sitting at table with them, breaks the matzah, to share with them, and their eyes are opened, and they realize it's him. The one they killed, it's him, and he's here with us. And just as they realize this, all of a sudden, he's gone. It says he disappeared. And then all of these other disciples, except Thomas, are gathered in a locked room because they're scared, and rightfully so. And all of a sudden, he's standing there in the locked room with them. And of course, they assume it's got to be a ghost. Nobody else gets in through a locked door. Must be a ghost. And of course, he knows that and says, yeah, I'm not a ghost. Give me a piece of fish to eat. And you can see the doubt and fear in their minds. And so, a little while later, another event, they've been telling Thomas what happened. Thomas doesn't believe them. That's why we call him Doubting Thomas. And then he shows up in the same way again. Thomas drops to his knees and says, my Lord and my God. And we call him Doubting Thomas, but how about the others? They didn't believe either. We should just call them all the doubting apostles, because that was pretty much the norm. But now that they've seen him alive, and the evidence of that looking back at it is virtually every one of them was martyred over the next 40, 50 years. They died refusing to renounce Yeshua, refusing to renounce Jesus, their rabbi. You don't do that for a fake. You don't do that for a myth you invented. When they saw him again alive, they knew that one had the power over life and death, that even death couldn't conquer their rabbi. How fearless can that make you? I mean, really. You know that all that happens if somebody kills you is you get to be with Jesus. So somebody points a gun at you and says, submit. You go, good luck with that. There's just no fear. And I've told you just as a little vignette here about the time that I was in the jail ward of a urban hospital facing a man who was literally demon-possessed and probably 2 feet taller than me. And I had no sense of fear at all. And it wasn't false bravado. It was as if I was in the middle of the presence of the Holy Spirit, and that demon, which was quite real, couldn't scare me. What power does he have? I mean, really. So in all of this, what I'm pointing out is the power of the presence of God. It produces in us a kind of calm submission. Not submission to bullies, submission to the one who made us and loves us, and who, because of his power and presence, we find ourselves with shalom, with peace, with calm. Some of you in years past have followed a television program called The Dog Whisperer. It's about Cesar Millan, who is a genius at helping unruly, frightened dogs become calm, submissive. He doesn't do that by beating them. He does that by helping them understand themselves and the humans that are a part of their lives. Some of you have heard me talk previously about our previous dog, Freddie. We got Freddie from a rescue shelter. He had been found on the streets of Joliet with wounds all over his body. This was an abused little dog who had somehow escaped from his abuser and was found running down the street in Joliet and brought to this rescue shelter. And we went looking to find a dog to bring into our families. And we just knew Freddie was it. And the people who ran the shelter told us how he'd been found and how he'd had cuts and burns on his body. And it was clear that he'd somewhere been abused by a human. And so he was very frightened and bent over and sort of avoidant of humans. So submissive, but the opposite of calm, frightened. And we adopted him and took him home and just loved on him. But he couldn't get over the fear that he had of humans. And in fact, my wife was out driving one day, had Freddie in the car and the window open, and while the car was still going, Freddie jumped out of the window and ran away. Come back to that. Still trying to escape, still fearful of what could happen to him. Well, we recovered him and got him back in the car and brought him home. And it took about 6 weeks. And at the end of about 6 weeks, he went from fearful, would run out of the house if the door opened even a little bit. And all of a sudden, at 6 weeks, thereabouts, you could see that he got it, that he was safe. And he was with people who loved him and cared for him and protected him. And he rolled over on his back. And from that day forward, he was calm and submissive. He was home. Freddie has since gone on the Rainbow Bridge. C.S. Lewis, if you ever want to read it sometime, does a great take on the animals that love us and who we love, and says basically, there's no chance they're not in heaven waiting for us. You can argue about that theology, I don't care. So now we have a new dog named Ephraim. We've had him maybe 3 years. And after Freddie had passed on and some time had passed, we basically said, it's time. We need to go and have another dog to love us and be part of us. And we went to a place where dogs that had been rescued were being adopted. And there was a little sort of fenced-in area, maybe 6 or 7 feet across, had a half a dozen dogs in it. And all of them were jumping up on the fence, looking excitedly at the humans who were coming there, except for Ephraim, who was lying on the ground, paying no attention to the people or the other dogs, looking, I would say, depressed. Sad, his life had not been a good one. I don't think he'd been abused, but I do believe he'd been ignored and not cared for and not loved. And he just stayed there. And we said, of course, this has to be ours. And we adopted him into our family. And again, it took probably 6 weeks for him to go from that state of depression to one where he knew he was loved and cared for. And he became, again, Caesar's expression, calm submissive, the two combined as a single way of being, if you would. And I believe that that calm submissive is the gift that God gives us when we turn ourselves over to him and accept his love, accept even the possibility of being loved by God, accept that there might actually be someone higher than me, more capable, in some ways far wiser than I could ever imagine to be. And when I do that, I become a lover of God. And God becomes the lover of me. And in that I am secure, submitted, calm, and joyful. It's all a part of that. They say that dogs are especially tuned in to the emotions of their humans. I don't want to say owners, because that's really not the relationship. And Ephraim's favorite person in our family is my wife. We joke that she's the queen, and he wants to be with his queen anytime that he can. And in fact, he stays outside of our bedroom door all night long, guarding the queen. Me, he figures he can manage on his own, but the queen, we need to guard the queen. So this last week, Vicky was hooked up to her IVs and the medicines and the pumps, and Ephraim knew something was wrong. When she came home, he came over and smelled her breath, and then became very, very quiet, and has remained very quiet and close to her since she came home. And he's there watching her. He's not his normal jump up and down self. Oh, we're trying to help him do some of that. But you know that he knows. He doesn't know what, but he knows something is different about his queen. And so he stays close and continues to monitor her. And when he comes close, he will sometimes just lick a little bit, that sort of sign of affection, and then settle down next to her, calm and submissive. So Luke, when he writes his gospel in chapter 24, starting in verse 50, then Yeshua led them out as far as Bethany, and he lifted up his hands and blessed them. He may actually have done this. And while blessing them, he departed from them and was taken up into heaven. Imagine being there for that. This has got to be the most mind-blowing thing that's ever happened in your life, except maybe for he's alive again. And then verse 52. After worshiping him, they returned to Jerusalem with great joy. Now, there are lots of words in Hebrew and Greek that get translated into English as worship. And this is a really special one. And you'll know why in about 30 seconds. And you want to remember this, Luke 24:52, after worshiping him. The Greek word there for worship, proskuneo, proskuneo, proskuneo. Pros, It's a preposition. It's like to face someone, toward something, sometimes with or other things, but the basic idea is toward. Kun is the Greek word for dog. You hear coon dog sometimes. Those are dogs that will tree raccoons. The old coon dog, it's actually sort of redundant. Coon refers to the raccoon, but when you say coon dog, it's actually dog dog. If you know that coon in Greek is dog. And the image conveyed by proskuneo is that of a dog next to its human, licking them. That sniffing and licking and that calm submission, knowing that you are loved. That kiss of the one who loves you first and protects you and cares for you. That's the word Luke chose to describe the disciples' hearts after their Messiah had ascended to heaven. May we be such lovers of our Messiah.